Welcome to I Have the Power Query. Let's learn some Power Query. This is a 4-part 101 series teaching you the absolute basics of just getting Power Query working. In Part 1, we input some data into an Excel table. In Part 2, we're going to load that data into Power Query. Actually, we're loading the data into a data model, but we're using Power Query to do that. Excel data is transformed in Power Query and stored in the data model. Think of Excel as the raw product, Power Query as the tool, and the data model as the finished product. This is the table we defined in Part 1 with its simple calendar information. We called it TBL months. Select Data and you'll see the Get and Transform Data section. Hover over Get Data and you'll see all the places a Power Query can connect to, not just tables. For now, come over to From Table Range and with the click of a button, you have loaded your table into Power Query. It was that easy. Welcome to the Power Query Editor. This isn't a separate program, you are still in Excel, just a different window. On the right-hand side, you can see that the query has the same name as our table, TBL months. Power Query has performed 2 applied steps. Source tells Power Query what the data source is, and Changed Type defines the data types of our columns, defining whether they contain numbers, words, or dates. Power Query automatically sets the data types, but we're going to try it for ourselves. Press the red cross next to Change Type to remove that applied step. The icon next to the column headers will change to ABC123, which means that no data type has been set. Let's see that again. Click the red cross and the box next to month name changes from ABC to ABC123. Come over to month name, click on that ABC123 and you get a few data type options. Select text. Make days whole numbers and make season text. But shouldn't month name be a date? Well, let's try to change it. Click on ABC and the data type options appear. Select date. Add new step to perform the step on top of the previous one. We try to convert month name to a date, but Power Query returned an error. After all, January on its own isn't a date. There's no day, there's no year. Let's convert it back to text. Click on the calendar icon, choose text and add new step. Power Query is still returning an error. But month name was a text a moment ago. What's going on? I tried to convert January to a text after failing to convert it to a date. So actually, I was converting an error into a text, which still results in an error. To undo in Power Query, just delete the steps by pressing the red crosses, like this. And we're back where we were, with no errors. Now that I'm in Power Query, I've decided that I want to add an extra column. I could just go back to Excel and add another column. But when you start loading data from hundreds of files, you would have to open each file to add your extra column of data. Power Query to the rescue. I want to add 2021 as the year. Go to Add Column on the Power Query ribbon and select Custom Column. In the dialog box, call the new column Year and make it equal 2021. This has created a column containing just 2021. I'm going to define the data type as a whole number. Now that we've finished processing, or rather querying our data, we can load our data into the data model. But loading data isn't quite that straightforward. For now, just go to Home and select Close and Load. Not Close and Load to, but Close and Load. Your query has loaded your data in a new table on a separate worksheet. We'll look properly at loading data in the next video. So, in this part, we've performed Power Queries on our data, looked at data types, added an extra column within Power Query, and loaded data into the data model. Part 1, the setup, and Part 2, getting the data in, are done. In Part 3, we'll look at getting the data back out of the data model. And in Part 4, we'll create graphs and tables from our results. See you in Part 3.